Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. This last time I thought we were at the end of our roster evaluations for position groups, and we decided to do one more show to cover special teams specifically and talk about the new kicking rules, talk about some of the players that we don't get a chance to talk about very often. And, I think maybe once every 5 years or so, we should update this show, especially if there's a turnover, at the kicker position or something like that. But same guys back this year. Nothing's really changed in that respect. They are getting a little expensive. I think Michael Dixon's the first or second most paid punter in the league, and
which he's worth.
Yeah, and then we can talk about Jason Myers because I think there is a debate there. Yeah. So hey, welcome in. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's not often we have this show because typically when we're doing our roster evaluations, we just skip this particular position group because there doesn't seem to be much to talk about. But with the new with the new kickoff rule coming in to effect, I think there's lots to talk about. So yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, I think so. And we'll get to that because I think, what I wanted to do is kind of set that up and kind of go through it in a logical kind of way and start with the coaching. Everything's new this year as far as the coaching on the team, save one single coach, Carl Scott, the defensive backs coach. He's the only holdover from the old regime. Mm-hmm. Now, I thought that we did a pretty decent job on special teams. If there was an area of the team that kind of was the best over the last 2 or 3 seasons, maybe save the offense in 2022. Special teams has kind of been it. Larry Izzo was the coach here for a little while and did a pretty decent job. Had a good crew to work with for the most part. Athletic guys on special teams for the most part, and then the kick specialists Dixon and Myers did a pretty decent job while he was here. So we've moved on. Jay Harbaugh, a name that sounds familiar. He is the son of Jim Harbaugh, and he is the special teams coordinator on this team. Came from the University of Michigan. I think he spent 9 years there.
Is he the son of Jim Harbaugh or John Harbaugh?
That's a good question.
I thought he was the son of John Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh was his uncle.
Okay. I didn't look into it, honest. I didn't. I'm just making some assumptions. But the cool thing about this guy is that, that he pretty much led that team, Michigan. And it's easy to do when you've got all the athletes that Michigan has. Top 25.
You were right. It's Jim Harbaugh's son. John Harbaugh is his uncle. They're backwards.
Okay. So, they finished in the top 25 in kick returns, in coverage, all that kind of stuff. Consensus special teams ranking number 1 in 2021 and number 2 in 2019, according to Football Outsiders. So he's kind of one of the best at what he does at the college level. Mm-hmm. Now they're going to try to translate that. It's kind of a good year to kind of come in as a special teams coordinator. Everyone else is brand new. But B, they've got some new rules that hopefully he can help direct the special teams into being very successful. He's got an assistant, Devin Fitzsimmons, joined the staff this year as well. He had spent last season with the Carolina Panthers in a similar role. So that's kind of the coaching. And it's hard to know. It's hard to know what you're going to get from a coach, whether they're going to be a good communicator, what the criterias are, how they measure success, all that kind of stuff is just really kind of, you almost have to just trust that Mike McDonald and company know what they're doing and hire good people to in these specific roles. And that's basically what I'm assuming here, is that this guy is fairly credentialed at the college level, comes in, and we'll see what he's got.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Harbaugh. So, there's a little bit of nepotism, him getting a job, given that his father and uncle are NFL head coaches, but
his father
but his track record has been good.
Yeah, but his father didn't hire him in San Diego, or not San Diego, but LA either.
Yeah. But it's but yeah, the track record's been good. It's hard to know if that is going to mean anything, because as you were saying, like, Michigan's just got better athletes than the guys on the other side of the field in most games, and they're much deeper too. So they've just got better athletes to run down the field and make tackles and do those kind of things. So that definitely makes it easier. But John Snyder, at least when Pete Carroll was here, put a premium on special teams and made sure that they had guys that was what they did and what they did well, more so than other teams. They factored that into roster decisions more than previous coaches in Seattle. So,
and Pete always prided himself on having special teams being one of the pillars that he really valued. Being able to flip the field, quote unquote, with a nice long punt, or putting the team, closer to the their own goal line, has always been a priority, and they've done a pretty decent job. I would say. I would, if I had to guess our overall ranking when Pete Carroll was here of our special teams unit over that entire time, I could easily say that we were probably in the top 10 most of that time.
Yeah, I think if you were to try and drop all those 14 years and average them into one rank, he'd probably be 5th or 6th. And the main problem keeping him from being higher would have been the Blair Walsh, Sebastian Janikowski years, because those were bad.
Wow.
Bad choices, bad decisions.
I forgot Sebastian Janikowski was on this team.
Yeah, the team had him and Jason Myers in camp, and chose Sebastian Janikowski over Jason Myers. Myers went and became a Pro Bowler, I think an All-Pro, with the Jets before signing the big contract to come back. If they'd made the right choice, they would have had him for less. But that's
well, they've got him now. So let's start with Jason Myers. I was going to start with Dixon, but it doesn't really matter. So Jason Myers is like 33 years old. So I'm going to read this verbatim just so I don't miss it. As of December 1st in 2023, so the season up until that point, he had been 8 for 13 on field goal attempts. And on the road that season, he was 61% on conversions, second worst percentage in the NFL. Only the Patriots, Chad Ryland, was worse. But he had a pair of games where he was perfect, like 5 for 5 on field goal attempts. And he was also 15 of 22, 68% in the 10 other games. So he was 29th out of 32 qualifying kickers on field goal percentage in 2023, only behind 2 other kickers, or 3 others, excuse me. And then, when you take a look at his contract, he signed a 4-year, $21.1 million contract in the offseason in 2023. So, 12 million plus in guarantees, et cetera. And the only reason I say that is that he's the kicker. There's really no competition. They pay him a premium. I think his salary is kind of top 6 at this point, top 7. When he signed it, it was probably top 2 or 3. at least before his extension. His extension was basically a little bump in pay, and so he's making about $5 million a year. And the reason that I think that it's getting to the point of diminishing returns for me is that there are so many other less expensive options and maybe more consistent options. And so at some point, and potentially after the season, they need to make a determination as to which direction they go. Now, if he has lights out, he makes 27 to 28 field goals this year. His kickoffs are consistently touchbacks and so forth. Maybe
you don't want touchbacks.
He earns another contract.
This year, you don't want touchbacks. That's the
Well, it does come out to the 30.
Thing.
Now that is the thing. So, and we can talk about that.
Yep, that's a thing that we can we'll get to when we do the rules. But if we're just talking about him and his contract,
but
I think Jason Myers is an underrated kicker.
Even after all the things that I said,
he had a year last year where he struggled at times, a lot, in the early to mid part of the season, and then he fixed stuff and was great down the stretch. Go back into 2022, and he set a franchise record for consecutive field goals made with 34. That doesn't happen just, because it's a bunch of chip shots. He was hitting 50-yarders, 50 50-yarders. I think he has the franchise record for the longest field goal too. Yeah, he wasn't as good last year, but he was great the year before. And he's polarizing. I get it because he had some consistency problems last year. And he's not old.
He's 30. He's not getting any younger. He's 33.
Yeah, but he's not old enough for where you start to see kickers fall off. He's got. I think he's got a chance this year to go back to what he's been. 2021, 2022, 2020, those years when he was one of the league's top kickers. And we'll see if he does. Great. If he doesn't, then you're right. You move on and you find one that's not going to cost you so much.
I guess he's not bad enough to essentially replace mid-season. So, I mean, if he's going to start, September 1st, he's going to probably be the kicker on January 1st. Okay. So let's talk about him more when we get to the rule changes in a little bit. So, punter Michael Dixon. So Seahawks expended a draft pick for this guy, 5th round pick.
He's been a weapon though.
Yeah. And he signed a 4-year, $14.5 million contract for his second contract, including a $6.5 million signing bonus. So when he signed that contract, he was the highest paid punter in the league.
Mm-hmm.
But, at 26 years old, he's got 47.6 yards per attempt. 43% of his kicks are inside the opposing team's 20. 8% of his attempts only, reach the end zone. So he's very good at kind of putting that thing in between the 20 and the goal line. And he's just very consistent. And so I don't mind paying him. I think, a guy like that on a mediocre team, which Seattle has been the last few years, really does add wins to the total, I think. Like can add wins because of the field position that you're going to help your defense with. And get your offense out of trouble.
I think one of the things that you look at is that his net average, because it's one thing to have a long average, but if you're out kicking your coverage and guys are getting big returns, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so you look at his net average was 44.1. That's great. That is.
I think
that's
that was
elite.
second in the NFL, correct?
Yeah.
And he's an all-pro.
Yeah. I mean, he is.
We're not talking just a Pro Bowler. He's an all-pro. He's literally the best, or in the conversation to be the best punter in the league.
Yeah.
Year in, year out.
and the fact that he had so many kicks because Pete Carroll's so conservative, where he didn't have the ability to punt the ball 50 plus yards. He was just trying to, kick it out of bounds and pin them deep. So there were a bunch of punts that were like 30
point.
That were 34 yards, but kicked out of bounds and pinned them back inside the 5. With a different coach, like say Mike McDonald, hopefully, where he's not kicking in those situations, you're going to see bigger stats for him, in that he's not going to be kicking with such a short field in front of him. He's going to have room when he does kick to get up there and do his thing. So
that is an interesting idea for a little bit of a discussion. A topic is that, where is Mike McDonald going to fall on making decisions on punts, where Next Gen Stats tells you that you should go for it in this particular situation. It might be a toss up, but maybe it's slightly leaning, to go for it statistically. But some coaches, and Pete was one of these guys, where they just feel the game. The game has a feeling, a vibe, a momentum, all those things. And Pete was right in the middle of all that. And so that's where Pete made decisions in that lane. He did not. They've got some analytic guys that work for the Seahawks and have for a number of years, specifically on the recruiting and the scouting areas and so forth. But I know it has to come into play on game days and challenges and all that kind of stuff. What are your thoughts around that?
There's something like Pete made a lot of like questionable decisions. And he's like, it's all about feel and whatever, but there are times when it's like you're punting, trying to gain 15 yards of field position. Just go for it. Or, those kind of things. Like there were some real head scratching, like thoughts in terms of some of the decisions that he made. And I think because he didn't ever go, the statistical approach and really know when it was best to go for it and when it wasn't. So
there would be many, many times. So Keith, here's the situation. There are many, many times where he'd be on the opposing team's 45-yard line. And so the other team, if you turned it over on downs, the other team would still have to go 55 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's the worst case scenario.
And he would
punt it frequently, and probably 9 out of 10 times. There were occasions where he, for whatever reason, it would be, 2 yards to go or half a yard to go or 4 yards to go. He would go for it. Now, of course, it would depend on the situation. If we were down, trailing, all that kind of stuff. But in a neutral field, first half type of a situation, Pete would usually punt that ball. Now, the safe play there is Michael Dixon was really good, and we flipped that field a little bit. We got the other team, the opposing team, inside the 20, maybe sometimes inside the 10. So that's an advantage if you have a defense that is capable.
They didn't have a defense that was capable. It didn't matter whether you pinned them inside the 10 or you gave them the ball at the 45. They were going to be able to move the ball, and they were going to get in scoring position. That's why it bugged me that they took the ball out of their offense's hands so many times.
Yes.
And the other thing is like, okay, so Dixon was good about not having them, go in for touchback. He only had 8 touchbacks on the year. But when he did have the ones that went in for touchbacks, a couple of those, like he had a 70 3-yarder, I think, in one game that went for a touchback because it just went over everybody's head. That was ones don't count. But there were a couple of those. But there were other times when it did. You're aiming for the corner and you hit it off the side of your foot just a tiny bit, and it goes through the into the end zone instead of just outside of it. And when you do that, Now they come out to the 20. So you were at the 45 and they get the ball at the 20. You just punted away a possession for 25 yards of field position when you have a bad defense.
Yes.
Like,
Right,
I don't.
Right. Exactly. Right. And that was the root of the frustration most of the time. Now, when you have a really good defense, sometimes that's the advantage. Sometimes you play into that a little bit.
Oh yeah.
But Seattle didn't have that. And so that wasn't part of the equation. Now, as we get better at our defense with McDonald, maybe that comes into play. I don't know. But I would think being a younger coach, wanting to be aggressive, just having that kind of mindset as a franchise, as a team, both on offense and defense, that they would take a few more liberties to try for one more possession, because that's what it's all about in the NFL, is scoring points. And when you've got a prolific offense, sometimes you miss. But if you're going to give them one more shot at picking up a first down, maybe sometimes that's the difference in the game. So
when you've got a prolific offense, I think you need to go for it more often.
Yeah.
They need to go for it more often. When you've got a tremendous defense, I think you punt it more.
Yeah.
Because
now
if
it will hurt you at some point, though, having kind of a more aggressive approach statistically. Like if we're playing, if we're just doing analytics and we're gonna go for it every time analytics says we should go for it. There are times where that's not going to work, and it's going to hurt us and potentially cost us a game, and then we'll see how everyone feels about it.
Okay, but the way the analytics don't say go for it every time. It's all situational.
Not every time, but you know what I mean. When they do say go for it.
It's all a matter of probability. You're right, because you're dealing with a small sample size of one instance in this particular game, and you fall on the wrong side of the probability. You've got a 68% chance of making it and you don't get there. Okay, that hurts, right? And you're right, it might cost you a game, but it might save you a game if you went for it and got it. And it gave you a chance to go get that go ahead point, or, some insurance points, that kind of stuff. It's all about playing the probabilities, and you have to, be aware of what they are. The analytics do not say go for it nearly as much as like people on Twitter will tell you to. But they do say to go for it far more than NFL coaches tend to.
Now, is there still an element of psychology involved in all of this?
Of course there is. And I think that's one of the things that it depends on your team and it depends on where you're at. I like being aggressive. I like the idea that you're saying, you know what? I trust my defense. We're going to go for it. I'm going to have faith in my offense to get it and my defense to hold them if we don't. And if your team's good enough to actually handle it, I like that. It's not people used to think that, the coaches that go for it all the time, they just do that because they have a bad team and they're just like, what do they have to lose and all of that? But I think it sends a message that, hey, I've got faith in my guys, that they're going to get it. And you know what? If they don't, I have faith in my defense that they're going to be able to get a stop and get us the ball back. So I think, if you've got the offense and or defense that's good enough, I think you should go for it more. There's so much of the time when Pete was punting the ball late in the game or whatever, it felt like surrender.
Yeah. And
I hated that. I hated the fact that it was like, they need 3 points. They're only 10 yards away from it. But we're going to punt. And it just felt like surrender. And that had to be deflating for the players. And maybe it wasn't, but it sure seemed like it would be.
I think so. I think you really do want to show your confidence in your team, whether it be offense or defense, in certain situations, for sure. And time management, I'm just so curious. That's one of the things you really can't predict, and you don't know until it actually happens what Mike McDonald is going to do in certain situations. Whether he's going to tend to be aggressive, where is he going to be a good time management guy, Do they have a system in place to like figure all that out ahead of time? You know, that's really important stuff. It doesn't seem like it. You don't think about it until it actually happens and they fail. It really shows up.
I mean,
okay.
does he have someone there beside him, telling him, hey, analytics say go here, the analytics say punt here,
or take a timeout or whatever it is.
Or, what the thing is, because as a coach, you've got 1,000 other things going on, and it helps to have a specialist whose job is to keep track of those little details and just make sure your team's not doing something stupid. Pete Carroll never had that, and he made some really weird decisions at times. I felt like he got better later on, but of course he also his team got progressively worse, so it didn't matter as much. But it would have been nice for him to have someone that he trusted that was there.
Yeah, and somebody to help him with challenges and all that stuff. I mean, it was I love Pete. I mean, he was a great team developer, player development guy, but also sucked at many different things. And those little things really. Okay, so let's talk about Chris Stoll.
Okay, now we're done with that.
Cool. So let's talk about the kick returning competition. Shall we? Let's talk about...
For people who are listening, Chris Stoll is the long snapper. The best thing about a long snapper is when you don't know his name, because that means he's doing his job really well. We did not have to talk about Chris Stoll at all last year because he did his job.
And so why should we start now?
Yeah. So let's not talk about it anymore. We're done.
So there's going to be a competition in camp this year for the returning jobs, and the return jobs this year are going to be a little bit more elevated. Now, the last few years, I think the last 3 years, DJ Dallas has kind of been our primary returner, both punt and kickoffs. Less than dynamic, less burst than you would like to have at that spot, but he was reliable in that he didn't fumble the ball, and he was pretty stout, and he could deliver a little punch on you, and occasionally he would break out for a nice 30 or 40 yard scamper to get it to towards midfield.
But he was never a guy that you were thinking every time he gets the ball, there's a chance he could take it the distance. He wasn't that guy.
No, but we do have an opportunity here. We've got a couple of guys. So let's talk about these rule changes first before we get into the guys, because I think that's going to be really important. So you'd mentioned at the last show that the league is kind of looking at the XFL, United Football League, kickoff rules, and they kind of adopted those. And basically the ball is still kicked off from the 35-yard line, just as it has been. So you're going to have your kicker lined up at the 30, with a 5-yard kind of run up to kick the ball at the 35. There's not going to be the guys on the same line now as the kicker. So when the kicker kicked, everyone on the team could then move forward and start running down the field. Now they're going to be lined up on the opponent's 40-yard line. So what would that be? 25 yards in front
forward
of the kicker. Mm-hmm. And they can't move until the ball hits the ground or is touched.
Yes.
And so you're going to have a kicker kick. The kicker can't cross the 50-yard line, I believe, until the ball is touched or hits the ground. Mm-hmm. And then the players at the 40 on the kickoff team can't move until the ball is. So you're going to have this kind of weird sort of suspended time warp thing going on where the ball is kicked, nobody's moving, and everyone's waiting for the ball to be received or touch the ground. And then the action begins. So then the kickoff team can go and strategically move towards the ball or, whatever they want to do. Okay, so that's that. The return team has to line up 9 players between the 30 and the 35-yard line. And then they've got 2 potential receivers that will be back. So,
Yep.
and whether they're back on, one side of the hash marks, the other side at the 5 yard line or the goal line, or they're staggered a little bit. One's in front at the 15, the other one's in back at the goal line. I don't know. That's to be determined based on strategy that we can start to talk about a little bit, but we're really going to have to almost get into it to really see what teams have in mind with this thing. Okay, so then both teams can't move until the ball is caught or hits the ground. The ball must land between the 20-yard line and the goal line.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if the ball doesn't reach the 20 or goes out of bounds? I think the ball comes out to the 40-yard line, Keith.
Yes. It comes out to the 40. If you kick it into the end zone at all, it comes out to the 30. It's automatically a touchback. If you kick it out of bounds, the ball will be placed at the 40. If you hit it, like if you do a squib kick and it hits before any of that, the ball is down the moment that it touches the ground. And it comes out to wherever the ball hit the ground or the 30, whichever one is furthest out.
So interesting. So, and we'll get used to those rules as time goes on. We can say them out loud right now. They really just don't mean anything unless you've just got a really good visual mind. You can see the field all over the place. So I was looking at an ESPN article around this rule change, and they say that the new rule will likely lead to more attempts at a kick return. Mm-hmm. The last year, kick returns accounted for 21% of all kickoffs. The ball was returned 21% of the time.
Yep, 1 in 5.
2024, they're looking at 50 to 60%. Mm-hmm. So here's what the real big thing that we're trying to do here. And, everyone's, some people might be asking, well, why don't they just go back to the rules the way they were 5 years ago? Well, what they're trying to do is they're trying to prevent injury and concussions. And also, in the last 5 years, they were trying to limit those opportunities by limiting the returns. And what everyone's kind of discovered is it really takes the dynamic nature of a kick return completely out of the equation.
Yeah, they'd reached a point where
they're trying to add that back in, but also be safe.
Yeah, they had reached a point where it was getting proposed that, team just starts the ball on the 25, go. There's no kickoff, no, and just you don't even do it. You score, that's done. The other team gets the ball at the 25-yard line going out. So, it had gotten to that point, and so they're like, okay, we don't want that, but we also don't want to go back to where we were, 10 years ago, where the kickoff is actually the most dangerous play in the game of football. There's more injuries and more severe injuries and more concussions on kickoffs than on any other play. And so, okay, how do we have kickoffs, have them be interesting, but still keep everyone safe? And that's why you have this weird situation where the coverage team is already 25 yards downfield. So that way, okay, so they're already there, and then they can't move until the guy catches the ball, which basically kind of eliminates this high speed, everyone's sprinting in one direction and the returner sprinting in the other, and they come in contact with each other, and somebody goes flying. It makes it much more like a normal play in terms of guys can come up and make tackles, but it's not going to be that like full speed versus full speed, car crash.
Right. So the most basic play that I think that you can hope for as a kick team would be for your kicker to kick it to like the 5-yard line, which would initiate a return likely. Now, mm-hmm. a returner could allow that to hit the ground and bounce through the end zone if he's lucky. If he's not lucky, that could bounce straight up. And to me, that would be the best. And then have the kick-off team limit the return to inside the 30. So if your touchback is going to be at the 30, if you're going to bring it out to the 30, anything up to the 30 is a plus for the kick team. So, and the entire strategy of a kickoff team is going to be built around that. Is we want a return, but we don't want it to go past the 30. Where do we need to do that in order to have that result happen the most? And that would be to kick to about the 5, have the return, and tackle the guy somewhere between the 20 and the 30-yard line. That would benefit the kickoff team the most. How do you think that return teams would strategize to maximize the benefit of this thing?
Well, I think you're going to look at, their guys are going to be told if you're in the end zone, it's going to be a touchback. So that's fine. We get the ball at the 30. Cool. But if you're not, they're going to have plays set up. You got 2 guys back, and depending on which one it goes, this is what we're doing. And it's going to be set up where, because the other guys aren't at a full sprint already until you catch the ball, you're going to have an opportunity to get moving, read what the other team is doing with, while you're looking forward, rather than having these things happen while you're looking up to catch the ball and then trying to adapt. You're going to be able to catch the ball, start forward, and read what the kick team is doing and read what your blocking is doing, and make decisions that way. I think you're going to end up with, I think we're going to get a lot more kickoff returns, and I think we're going to get more dynamic kickoff returns. I think that the days of having that steady DJ Dallas type just came to an end, because there's not much to be gained from having that. If he's going to catch the ball at the the 6-yard line and only get to the 30, then okay, you're not gaining anything. So this you want guy,
if you have something, if you have the guy, if you've got the massive dynamic return specialist, he could be one of the most important players on your team. Because if you've got a guy that can return, let's just say it's like Devin Hester, okay? One of the best returners of all time.
The best returner of all time.
If you've got a guy like Devin Hester, where you could potentially have 5 or 6, maybe even 7 or 8 plays per season that could burst wide open and be returned for a touchdown. Now, I'm not saying they're all successful, but there's that one kick where you know that you're only just a shoestring away or whatever from being a return. That's a significant play in the NFL, is to just completely in 7 seconds go from, being down 7 to tied, or being tied and up 7, at critical junctions in the game. It would be something else. So I think that position over time, maybe not this year, teams just didn't have enough time to really figure out the kick returner position. But I think as time goes on, that position will be a specialist position, and you'll see massive upgrades there.
Seattle made taking a risk to do that.
Yeah, they did.
They made changes to the roster based on this kickoff rule.
Yes,
they made no effort to bring back DJ Dallas, and instead brought in. My brain wants to say Chenault, which isn't the right word, but
I think it's real close to that, right?
It's my Pacific Chenault, Northwest Junior. Heritage.
Laviscus Chenault.
Okay, so it is
Junior in free agency.
So he's a guy that's what he does. He is fast and shifty and makes people miss, and he's known for being that kind of athlete as a returner. They signed him as a wide receiver. They didn't need another wide receiver.
And he's 6'1", 220 pounds. So this isn't some like shifty 180-pound guy.
Yeah.
Although we'll talk about a couple of those in a second. But he's kind of a bigger guy, not quite real shifty, but he's got some dynamic sort of elusiveness to him.
Yeah.
Even at that size.
He's gonna be a guy that's gonna be given chances, and every time he catches the ball, because of the way they've set this up, to benefit the kick returner over the coverage team, there's gonna be a chance, and he's got the speed to do something serious with it when
And
he gets
breaking
it.
tackles, I think, is going to be a factor
Yeah.
because you're not a heat-seeking missile yet as a outside cover guy. That's
Mhm.
basically going to be, your job is basically to be first man down the field. Those kind of jobs, I mean, punt returns are still going to have that sort of thing, but on the kick, he's going to have a chance to have a 20-yard head start on anybody. And he's going to, like you said, he's going to be able to read the field, see the openings, see the creases develop. As the season goes on too, as film gets accumulated on what teams are doing defensively to defend against returns, you're going to be able to take advantage of some things. So that's a name I think that people really haven't paid attention to on the off-season signings as a free agent. But Laviska Shenault also has some ability to receive the ball as well. I think he makes this team. And I think he ends up being the primary returner.
Yeah, I mean that's why that is why they signed him.
Yeah.
He's going to be like the 5th or 6th wide receiver.
Because you're not going to want. I still think there's some injury potential, Keith. So for me, it's like you're not going to want your primary receivers like Jackson Smith and Jigba, who's very shifty, can really move around in small spaces. I don't think you would want a guy like that returning because of the injury factor. But maybe a guy like Derek Young gets an opportunity. Dwayne Eskridge is going to get an opportunity. Now, here's a kid that we've just basically not completely battered and beaten this guy over the last 3 seasons, but he's been injured, oft injured, and not gotten on the field, not had opportunities because of that. And when he has been healthy, he's been restricted because he just hasn't had any playing time or practice time with the team and so forth. So here's a guy with a fresh, clean slate. If he can stay healthy, if he comes into camp like top shape, healthy, no nicks and cuts, and comes in, he could take the job. When he was in college, he was magnificent at this type of a role. But I don't know where he's at. Mentally, I don't know where he's at in the last 3 or 4 seasons. So we'll see. Beyond that, they've got a couple of rookie guys. Now, we talked about the other day in our cornerback discussion, we talked about a couple of draft picks, and one of them is Nehemiah Pritchett. And Nehemiah Pritchett was the primary return guy at his college.
Yep.
And he's got an opportunity really to kind of break out and make the team based on special teams ability. And I think he's going to be given a shot. And I haven't heard about this competition yet. They haven't really talked about it as far as, okay, who are the 3 or 4 guys that are vying for this role? It's just this is the logical kind of
Pritchard deserves a shot to try and get this because he's got the speed. We know he's got the speed, and he did it in college. So yeah, he's not a receiver. He's a defensive player, but he's got the experience to do it. And I think that his, with that speed, and it gives him another chance to justify his spot on the roster. He's going to be a guy who's on punt coverage and probably a guy on kick coverage. But if he can also be a kick returner, it just makes it easier for him to make the roster.
I agree. And his speed is like 4.34, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
D. Eskridge had a 4.39. Kenny McIntosh could very well be in the running for something.
Yeah, but didn't he run like a 4.8?
Yeah, but he did return kicks for Georgia when he was there.
Yeah. He returned punts.
He has some experience.
He did return punts. Returning punts is different than returning kicks because part of it is just you have to know where the people are coming at you while you're looking up to catch it. And it's such a judgment call on. Do you catch the ball and then try and jump out of the way of the guy that's trying to take your head off? Or do you call the fair catch? And you don't want to call the fair catch if you don't have to, because you're giving up 5-10 yards. But you also want to call it when you have to, because otherwise, if you get clobbered right as you're touching the ball and you fumble it, then it's almost certainly going the other direction. So that position, I think, will remain kind of the steady is better than dynamic is if you're constantly making the right decisions on those cases. And I could see McIntosh, very well winning that job. But I don't see him in the kick returner simply because he doesn't have the speed.
Interesting. Devin Witherspoon would be fantastic at this, I think.
No.
He would be.
No.
I mean, they're not going to play him there. I just think
you don't put your best defensive player in there to.
Oh, I know.
Get clobbered on kick returns.
He's just so shifty. He's so fast.
He's so dynamic, athletic.
Woolen could, if Woolen was a little bit more of a physical player, Woolen would be interesting. Okay, so a couple of exceptions to the rule kind of questions. So what happens on onside kicks? So you had mentioned the other day that teams need to declare their intent. Mm-hmm. So that is a fact, Keith?
Yes. You have to declare your intent, and then everything would set up as if it was an onside kick in last year, using last year's rules. But I think I read somewhere that there were only 2 successful onside kicks in the entire regular season. So pretty much
it's a desperate situation, right?
Yeah. It's one of those things where, it's not something that has been used. It's really been taken away from, teams already simply because of the fact that, you can only have so many people on one side of the kicker, and guys can't get that running start. And, basically they'd already done certain things that made onside kicks almost impossible. And so,
that's not going to change.
That's not going to change. And so the fact that you have to declare, hey, this is what we're doing, and it takes out the possibility of a surprise onside kick. Honestly, it does not really change anything as far in the game. It really just doesn't.
One other change that's going to happen is basically the elimination of the squib kick. Mm-hmm. At the end of games, you saw teams, particularly teams that were ahead, did not want to give the primary kick returner an opportunity to scorch them and come up with a big return. So they would squib it to an up back, on the 20 or whatever, and take the ball at the 25 or 30 as opposed to having a potential big time return. That's going to end. Any kick that lands short of the 20-yard line automatically comes back to the 40. So that strategy is gone.
I'm not seeing this in this article I'm looking at right now, but I guess in the original proposal, they said to the 40 or the first place that the ball touched the ground.
If it was further up.
If it was even further, but that does not seem to be in the wording.
Huh.
So maybe they pulled that out. It's just like at one point they said the touchback was going to be the 35, and then that got moved back to the 30. So,
yes. So they could pass the rule. Yes. Which tells me that teams are maybe potentially okay with the ball starting at the 30. So originally the ball used to come out to the 20. Then it moved to the 25. Now it's going to be the 30. Our team's going to go ahead and kick it into the end zone, knowing that the potential for a return, a dynamic return, is so high that they'll play the conservative approach and give the ball to the 30. That could evolve over the season. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. But I could potentially see that
early in the season. I expect it, and I expect to see more of it, and then we'll see how things shift based on. If teams are finding that kicking, allowing the return is getting, there's a lot of tackles being made between the 20 and 25. Then they're going to be like, okay, we're going to risk it, and we're going to do that because that's better field position.
So here's the real secret sauce. So the 80% of the drives last season started at around the 25-yard line, either just short or at the 25. That's 80%. So 80% of all drives means that 80% of the time teams were okay with other teams starting at the 25. So how many teams would be okay with teams starting at the 30? That's only 5 yards. Here's the deal though with those 5 yards. Those 5 yards translate into more successful, longer drives. They translate into more points. Now, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a lot, but over the course of a season, that could be the difference between, say, 2 to 3 points per game increase.
So I did
scoring.
this big statistical project a while back, and the data is a decade out of date now. So, but it was based on the 10 years before that, and 5 yards was worth 0.8 yards per drive. Sorry, 0.8 points per drive. Like that's how much it would shift. And
how many points is that per game? I mean, if you've got four or five
that's the thing.
Possessions that started at the 30 as opposed to the 25, is that an increase of 2.5 points over average?
Yeah.
Last year?
It increases the number. Yeah. So being like those 5 yards, would result in a difference of
couple 2-3 points a game.
4 points.
Yeah.
Right. Five times 0.8. It's 4 points. And so you're talking about, that could be significant, especially considering the number of games that are within 3 points. A lot of NFL games are really close. They're within one possession.
Right.
And
so if the whole thing changes though, so if the whole league moves to like, okay, 30 yards is the 30 yards and both teams are equally kind of giving that ground, then it evens out. But if there are teams that are really strategic and stingy and they don't want other teams to get to the 30, they're going to figure out a way to get a kickoff in a certain spot where their kickoff team has a chance to stop them earlier than the 30. So to me, it's fascinating. I mean, it really is fascinating because there are going to be certain teams that are going to be better at other teams at this right from the get-go. And other teams are going to have to evolve or move along towards, whatever it's going to be, halfway through the season or by the end of the season.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that what we see at the beginning of the year, the tendencies that we see from teams is not going to be the tendency that we're going to see from teams at the end of the year because teams are going to figure out, okay, when we're better off kicking it into the end zone and letting them have the 30 because by dropping it at the 5, they're getting out to the 35 regularly, and we don't want that because that's another 5 yards. Or it's going to be the other way. They're like, we're kicking into the end zone, they're getting to the 30, but we shouldn't be doing that. We should be dropping at the 5 and tackling at the 25 because that backs them up. That's a 4-point swing in our favor. So
yes.
We're going to look at that.
Right.
Oh,
well, and teams are going to know what they're good at, what they're not good at. So if you've got a really good tackling team and you've got some really stellar athletes on your special teams team, you're likely to put the ball in play. If you know that you're bad, you're going to kick it in the end zone.
Clarification from something we said earlier. If the ball lands in the field of play and bounces or rolls into the end zone, it's automatically a touchback when it gets to the end zone, but it will be marked at the 20-yard line and not the 30. So, don't let the ball bounce.
Wow. That's some incentive to catch the ball.
That's some incentive to catch the ball.
Can you call for a fair catch on your 5, or is that where the ball is placed then?
That would be where the ball is placed.
If you call for a fair catch, wherever you call a fair catch, that's where it is still.
Yep. So you can't call for a fair catch and then just take the ball at the 25 like they did last year. If it's going to fall in that zone between the goal line and the 20-yard line, you pretty much have to catch it.
Wow. Interesting. Maybe they should have our punter drop kick the ball.
That's one of the things that I was thinking about when we were talking about this last week was, why wouldn't you do this with a
specialist who knows how to get the ball exactly where he wants to get it?
Well, yeah. And in a situation like when you see a safety, right? Your team is kicking off at the 20-yard line. Well, they'll usually have the punter pump the ball off the 20-yard line rather than having the place kicker kick it, because you get more hang time. It's better for the coverage team. It ends up being less likely that their team's going to do something special with it. Well, in this case, if you've got a guy like Dixon kicking off from the 35, he can get it there. He has control over the ball. I mean, that's a long punt to get it down there. But
I mean, he wouldn't. For me, I think the difference between a kickoff and a punt would be they wouldn't allow him to punt on the 35. It'd have to be a drop kick. He'd have to hit the ground first. The ball would have to hit the ground first and kick it out from there. I mean, that's why you don't see punters punt the ball on kickoffs right now.
You do if it's after a safety.
True.
That's a special
exclusion.
That's just a kickoff.
That would be fascinating to me. I mean, obviously punting, I think at the 35 would have a significant role for kickoff teams if that was the case, for sure.
Because if you give a guy like Dixon,
I'm not sure that the drop kick allows. Maybe it does give him an advantage, Michael Dixon, because he's so good at it, and he's practiced it probably more than any other punter in the league, just because that's part of the process that he goes through for himself.
And his style, without having any pressure, he doesn't have to worry about guys flying at him or any of that. He can just focus on where he wants to put the ball. That, and talk about a weapon for him to be able to drive the ball high in the air, and have him drop it down at like the 5-yard line.
Anywhere along that 5-yard line. Or anywhere in the 7-yard line, or the 3, or sideline to sideline. I mean, he's really got that much control.
He does.
This could come into play. I could actually see this, where Dixon might have a role in certain situations where maybe Myers is struggling with this or whatever. I don't know. It's gonna be fascinating to me.
And I know at one point he wanted to basically take some of his punts as a drop kick where it bounces first, because that's what he did, in Aussie Rules football. And so he has control over it, and he knows that getting it that low allows for a different trajectory and you can hit it farther. In soccer, you'll see goalkeepers do it. It's called a half volley. And it does. It adds significant distance. He played with it. Pete Carroll said no.
I've heard that Michael Dixon on a drop kick can get knuckleballs and crap, like coming out of that thing, where it's just so squirrely. You know what I mean? That would be amazing. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Fun to think about.
A lot of fun to think about.
We'll get to see it in a few months. Nothing's going on right now, Keith. So
Nothing.
we just finished this long series looking at the roster. Now that's over. And we've got shows, obviously, but there's really no pressing agenda.
Mini camp has already happened. It's done. It's a 6-week gap before players start to report for training camp. And at this point, no news is good news, because if players are in the news between now and the start of training camp, it's never a good thing.
So what we're doing as a show, and I'm looking directly at our schedule right now, is that we are going down to one show a week for the next 4 weeks, 5 weeks. We've got a coaches show coming up where we're going to talk about all the coaches. We've got a look around the NFC and the NFC West. Look at what our competition is. That should be a good show. That's a fun show. We've got a beer show. I think we're going to have Dan Viennes come back on our show. We were on his a couple of weeks ago. He's going to come back on our show and have some fun with us on the question and answer show, I think. But we'll figure that out. We're guesting on a show coming up in mid-July, mid to late July, right before training camp. And then we'll have some training camp previews. I mean, basically, we've got about 5 shows before training camp begins, and a couple of guest appearances beyond that. So it'll be, we've tried to do like 2 or 3 shows a week during this time, and it just gets kind of convoluted and a little bit sort of gimmicky because you'd run out of stuff to talk about. This is the time off for the teams. There's no news coming out. You're speculating. You're kind of getting into some junk journalism. So we can avoid that for the most part if we just limit ourselves a little bit. That question and answer show should be a lot of fun with the beer. We'll have to figure out the beer this year. I am kind of, I like 2 or 3 different beers, and I'm not, you have a broader spectrum of beers that you enjoy, as well as the beers that you enjoy are sometimes heavier than I am used to or like and enjoy. So I'll have to compromise with you and figure something out. Maybe you can do what you really love and I can do what I really love, and we'll see what happens.
Or what we could do is just not do beer at all and do whiskey.
I can't do whiskey. I can't do whiskey. I haven't been able to do whiskey. So there's a certain day in time in my life where I could do whiskey before that day and I could not do whiskey after that day. And that was a long, long time ago, but I still have that. It changed my DNA. I mean, just can't. I can barely smell it. I've got a buddy.
It sounds like there's a story there.
There is a story, yeah. But my parents watch this podcast, and I'm going to save that story, Keith.
Yep. We'll save that. That'll be one of my questions for the question.
I will answer truth. If it is one of your questions, I will answer truthfully. Yeah. Had too much fun one day. Didn't get in trouble.
Good.
Miraculously. Yeah. But, we'll talk.
Yep.
I would say I would tell the story. But we need a little bit more time.
Yeah.
It's time to go. Fancy
Let's
that.
go.
All right. Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find it on your favorite podcast platform, Spotify, I don't know, all of them, right? All of them. And then our own YouTube channel. We've got a subscription-based channel. It's free of charge unless you want to send us a donation. There's a few levels on there if you want. And then that's it. And we'll be back in a little bit of time, and we'll talk about some coaches. That'll be the next show. So,
awesome.
Until then, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.